I mean, let's go back to the tariffs, because in terms of this sudden sort of massive U-turn by Donald Trump, do you believe this was him just sort of like, it's all part of the cunning plan of what he was going to do, Mr. Disruptor, or do you think that he was reacting to the markets in turmoil?
I don't think he has a plan. I think that's blatantly obvious. But I think the reality is that if the US economy slumps, then Republicans in Congress, which could overrule all of this if they wanted to, will stop supporting him. You have those midterm elections. He could lose a lot of power. And that is the reality. And it was hitting hardest those states that supported Donald Trump. The EU has just dropped its reciprocal tariffs, but they had designed them to affect those states where they voted for Donald Trump. So they were really trying to make that hurt.
Manufacturing states that wants it,
Now, I don't think that's why he changed his mind, but in general, that reality does come home to roost. He acts like the laws of gravity don't apply to him, but eventually they will.
They do, indeed. Well, let's talk to a man who's been in the White House. He's been at meetings where the tariff policy has been discussed. He's been in the room. That's Rick Gates. He joins us once again. He's former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016. Very good afternoon to you, Rick.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, what do you think happened between Donald Trump basically telling everyone to calm down and everything was fine, and the White House press spokespeople saying that he had a spine of steel that will not break, to suddenly him announcing that people were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit out of line, and then pausing those tariffs for 90 days for the most countries in the world?
Yeah, look, I think there's a number of factors that are moving the tariff discussion. A lot of people internationally aren't paying attention to our budget process, which is ongoing right now between the House and the Senate. And that does play a role in these tariffs. If Trump does not get his tax cuts through, it makes the tariffs much more difficult. And he needs those Republican votes to make sure that happens. That is happening. That happened yesterday. It's going on today. So I think when you look at the tariffs, he did achieve what he wanted to do. He's got now over 75 countries over the next 90 days that they're going to be negotiating tariff deals with.
Wouldn't they have done that anyway? Even with the threat of the tariffs, without actually, even if he said they're going to come on in 90 days' time or in a month's time, he didn't actually have to impose them from the immediate moment. I'm pretty sure that most of those countries would have come to the table with the US at any point anyway.
Perhaps, but this makes them come a lot faster, and it comes with a lot of leverage on Donald Trump's side. You've already seen countries like Israel negotiate, drop those tariffs. That's a good indication. Absolutely, there are other factors. The bond market probably had something to do with it in terms of the longevity of how long this could play out. So I think, to identify and say there's one factor or Trump buckled, I disagree with that characterization. I think that there are a lot of dots that are involved in this, and to connect those is very complex. And you need to pay attention to, multiple aspects of the tariff arguments, the budget debates going on, and other issues that are impacting the global economies to see. We also had the largest stock market increase yesterday, right? Now, that wipes out the 3 days of losses last week. But again, this is an evolving process. It's a 90-day pause. It doesn't mean he's eliminated all the tariffs yet.
No, well, again, we know we've got 10% tariffs on us and others. And again, we're supposed to be, big friend of the United States. We're now lumped in with anyone and everyone in the rest of the world. I mean, Canada and probably Mexico probably thought they were friends of the United States, and they're facing even higher tariffs at 25%. Do you think his change of mind has anything to do with the fact that he would have seen the boss of JP Morgan on Fox News Business talking about how there was a high chance of recession in the US, and watching the stock market go down, but also seeing the price of American debt, servicing American debt, going up in the bond markets as well, that actually it was a bit, it's a phrase here we have here, squeaky bum time for the American economy, and enough people got in the room with Donald Trump to basically shake him back to his senses?
No, look, there's many advisors that wanted to keep pressing on with these tariffs, as there were advisors telling them, hey, maybe let's put a pause on this. I don't think President Trump really cares what Jamie Dimon thinks. Jamie Dimon certainly, was out of step with him along the campaign trail, and it didn't really have an impact. So I think, again, what you have to look at is it's a bigger process. It's an evolving process. It's not over by any stretch. There's a lot more to come. And I think we'll have to wait to see how other markets, you just mentioned the EU, has now stopped its retaliatory tariffs. Maybe they'll come to the table, maybe they won't. China, as you see, is facing the brunt of it. And that is a concern, I think a continuing concern for a lot of countries, because that is not resolved yet. And that's a great indication that President Trump is willing to press on if he believes that's the right path.
Well, you say China is bearing the brunt of it, but actually it's US consumers bearing the brunt of it, because ultimately either China won't ship those cheap goods to US or they'll ship them, they'll be much more expensive. And it's US consumers who'll be paying more or can't get hold of the goods they want to buy more. The idea that those goods are just suddenly going to be manufactured in America, given higher labour costs in America, even allowing for those tariffs, or that they're going to be able to move that quickly, is and given also we don't know whether the tariffs are going to be there tomorrow or next year or any time. That's for the birds. So it's not China bearing the brunt. It's American consumers bearing the brunt.
If they ultimately buy Chinese products, but this is the whole goal. They could source them from other countries. We could also look at manufacturing. Manufacturing is going to take time. There's no question about it. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But that is the goal of these policies, is to move manufacturing back to the U.S. There are many Americans that are willing to sacrifice for a period of time. Nobody knows how long that is.
They may be, but 70% of all goods sold on Amazon alone are produced in China, and the next 20% are actually they're component parts that go into goods. So even goods that are sold as American goods by American brands have a huge amount of Chinese imports in them. So even those homegrown, home manufactured goods in America will also cost more, or they won't be able to get those parts. Now, we saw what happened in the wake of lockdown when we had that really massive difficulty in just sourcing some things. You just simply couldn't buy some things for months on end. That's going to be impacting the American consumer as well, isn't it? At the end of the day, an awful lot of these people who were promised an improvement in the standard of living, some tax cuts, they're going to be living with higher costs and they're going to be living with higher taxes, because ultimately this tariff is a tax and it's passed on to consumers.
Yeah, but the design is to be short term. So yes, there's going to be pain in the short term, but there's a payoff in the end, and the longer term gain is what President Trump is trying to get to. That is the whole design of this effort.
Now that's the thing. That's the bit that doesn't make sense to me. And this is where we've had these ideas. This is what's going to happen. We're going to bring onshoring of manufacturing back to the US. Now, look, I completely understand that. We all know, in the free market, yeah, great cheap goods, but it does mean an awful lot of people are buying cheap goods, but are losing their own job as their job is shipped off to Mexico or to China or call centre in India or whatever. I completely and utterly understand that. However, there are lots of reasons why companies manufacture in countries with not just cheap labour, but lower regulation, lower standards and the like, because it has a massive impact on the bottom line. But I don't understand how these tariffs can both, A, produce huge amounts of revenue for the United States government to help pay off the multi-trillion-pound debt, and at the same time, B, force companies to the table so that they will lower their tariffs, and then in return the US will lower their tariffs, and so we can just get back to more free trade. And also C, maintain high tariff barriers and force manufacturers to move their manufacturing to the US, particularly to those swing states that went for Donald Trump, and bring those jobs back to America. I don't see how you can do even one of those three things at the same time, let alone all three.
Well, let's take them out. Your point C, it's already being done. Major corporations are moving manufacturing back to the U.S. Again, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take time. You have Nike, you have Apple, you have a number of companies that have already said they're going to commit to manufacturing in the U.S. That's part of the negotiation.
They'll be using cheap Chinese components.
No, not necessarily. They're looking for other ways to source. There are other countries that source some of those products. That's exactly what they're doing. Look, this is the whole point. It's forcing us to do this. It's forcing us to look to other places in China. It's forcing us to look at manufacturing in the U.S. There was a lot of criticism, as you identified in COVID, when the U.S. couldn't source products except from China. Yeah. It made us look weak. It perceived a weakness on our own part. Scott Bessent, I think said it best. We have got to be stop being an exporter of services and be a manufacturer of goods and services. Yeah. And that's exactly what President Trump is trying to do. It's gonna take time, and it's gonna be an evolving process.
Yeah. But one of the things that Donald Trump keeps saying is how America's been exploited and it's terrible. They've got these trade deficits with a lot of these countries, but there is no conceivable point until the end of time when Cambodia or Vietnam or other small countries are going to be net importers of American goods as opposed to net exporters to America. They are smaller, poorer countries, smaller populations, less money. Of course, America is going to be importing more from those countries. So even sort of the ideological basis of it doesn't make sense.
Well, sure. I think it does. I mean, if you look again at the bigger picture, you're trying to get to a trade deficit neutral position, and the U.S. is not anywhere near there. So any negotiating tactic, any leverage point that Donald Trump has, he's going to use. You're absolutely right. We may not get absolutely to zero, but we're going to get much closer than we are right now, and that's an advantage.
I can understand when you're dealing with other developed first world economies like the EU, got similar, for instance, labour costs and the like, but and regulation. But you're not going to get to parity in terms of trade with poorer countries selling you cheap goods, which, by the way, US consumers want to buy.
Yeah, again, we are going to look as a country, we're going to look for other places to source those goods if we have to. Other countries are going to come to the table. There's already been offers on certain products, certain assets that the U.S. can get from other places. Again, it's not going to happen in a day or a week. Everybody is expecting that, President Trump makes the announcement, then it's going to snap at his fingers. It's going to be done. It's evolving. It's going to take time. There are multiple layers to it, but it is moving in that direction. You're right. We may not get all the way there, but we're certainly going to get much closer than we are now, and that is part of the goal.
I mean, you categorically will not get with a lot of those countries. In terms of the goal and where we get there, where are we with China? I mean, there are understandable reasons to put tariffs on Chinese goods, particularly the mass state support for, steel industry and the like, which means that no one else can even remotely compete with the prices that they can sell it. And there's a deliberate Chinese policy in lots of cases of buying up a lot of resources, manufacturing, and then dumping it on a market, basically effectively ruining other economies, industries in this area. There's an argument for that. It's a very different market, and it's actually often very economically hostile in that way. Well, where does this end? Because I can't see neither Donald Trump nor Xi Jinping being men who are willing to sort of back down and ever look like they've taken a defeat. How do we come to something that we can somehow claim is a win for both sides?
Well, I think cooler heads will prevail. I think it has definitely escalated. I think it may continue to escalate, over the next few days until there is a breaking point. Unlike 2016, 2017, when Donald Trump introduced tariffs to China and China basically accepted the majority of them, it's a much different story this time. I don't think they're having the same posture, but I also think that they are worried that their economy is fragile right now, too. And I think both the U.S. and China recognizes that our economies are dependent, codependent on each other. And so the question is, how far will it escalate? But more importantly, how long will that escalation continue? If they escalate another couple of days and then they come to their senses, then I think, things could, come back the other way, and it might be calmer markets. But I think that China has got to be concerned, too, because the more they push on these retaliatory tariffs, the more they put their economy in jeopardy. And this is becoming whose economy is stronger. I'm sure I know where Donald Trump is going to stand on that. He's going to say the U.S., and I'm sure President Xi Jinping is going to say the same thing. So where is the point that they come to the table and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's start negotiating.
But as you say, they are completely interdependent. I mean, the U.S. economy and the American and Chinese economy almost couldn't survive in the same level, in the same way. So, in terms of the driving force for Donald Trump, is it what's happening to the man or the woman on Main Street that matters most rather than Wall Street? And actually, it's about what their dollar in their pocket. Because at the end of the day, all the other issues that came up at the last presidential election in November were actually dwarfed by the concern that people have for the cost of living. Even the immigration issue, it's about cheap labour coming into cultural issues as well, and criminality, but it's cheap labour coming into the country, undercutting working class jobs. That's still part of the cost of living. At the end of the day, if people feel poorer, they're going to be very disillusioned with Donald Trump and the Republicans very, very quickly, aren't they?
Yeah, look, if you look at what's going on domestically here in the U.S., the press has really moved off immigration. It's still being covered, but the economy is front and center. And President Trump and the Republicans know full well that if they don't deliver on some of those economic promises, it's going to be painful in this midterm cycle. And then that gives the president basically a 2-year cycle instead of a 4-year cycle, because he'll lose the ability to use the House as a way to push his policies. So they're very keenly aware of that. They're being very careful. That's why our budget process playing out right now is so important. Getting those permanent tax cuts through that bill is going to be extremely important. If that does not happen, that's going to put the tariffs in jeopardy, and that's going to put Main Street in a very bad position, and that means voters are going to take it out on him in November.
Well, given that we are all being affected by this international trade war, even at 10% or 125%, fears of worldwide recession impact all of us in the UK and elsewhere. I'm very pleased that Rick Gates is in the room, giving us some calm voiced thoughts of reason in the room. Thank you so much for joining us. Rick Gates is former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump back in 2016, still involved in the White House now. Benjamin Butterworth, it is fascinating because we're told again, I mean, Donald Trump changed his tune every day, but again and again, people who support him trotting out these ideas about we're going to achieve this, this, this and this, all of which are completely mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, that guy, to be deputy campaign manager of a successful presidential campaign must be very bright. And yet Donald Trump has people as clever as him jumping through hoops that clearly don't make sense. Yeah. Vietnam said to the US a couple of days ago, all right, we'll drop all tariffs. Yeah. Then the reciprocal will be zero, right? And the White House said, no, that's not enough.
What
parity.
Can we do? Yeah.
OK, the average Vietnamese person earns $4,000 a year. The average American earns $76,000 a year. There's never going to be parity. And actually, there's a valid question to say, is it a good job to have people in America making very cheap T-shirts, for example? Yeah. Is that actually a profitable job, a rational way to run your economy?
They'll have to run an awful lot less to do. But also, Americans aren't willing to pay those prices.
Exactly. And if it's about jobs, well, maybe manufacturing jobs in the medium term, some of them will go back to the US. But in the immediate term, a lot of jobs will be lost by every company that suddenly got a $100,000 tax bill for every $100,000 of imports.
Yeah. It's really that simple. I mean, again, the people who are defending Donald Trump on this, and again, it's not, I've said it before, I will say it for a millionth time, it is not Trump derangement syndrome to say that this is a dumb policy. It really isn't. And the idea that he's got people at the table, the idea that America can't bring any country to the table with a flick of their fingers if they insist. They can threaten things, even if they want to threaten things. But again, as you say, so many of the things they announce, you can't, they put tariffs on countries which they already have a free trade deal. It is absurd. A lot of the aims are impossible or mutually exclusive with the other aims they've stated. It does not make sense to me. And we are all going to be poorer as a result. We are all, including Americans and Brits, going to be poorer as a result of all this. It's absolute madness, if you ask me.